Hey fellas, it's me! That's right, the bisexual battle guy! Yeah, that was a good gag, wasn't it? Just a great gag. Just an incredible, legacy-defining, not retrospectively embarrassing gag at all. Then again, the pitch got eyes on it and made the talk of the community for a day, so if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Anyhow, I originally wanted to put out another video or two last year after the infamous pitch video, but alas, the only battle I can never win is the one against my own crippling laziness. But hey, it's better late than never, right?
Neon! When are you going to fucking upload?!
Regardless, the 2025 season of Death Battle is over, and yes, we do have to call it the 2025 season and not season 12, because apparently, counting is for squares. So, with the year over and the 2026 season just on the horizon, I better take advantage of my currently established reputation and audience and rank the 2025 Death Battle season. Look, as long as I get my ranking out before the big guys, I consider that a win. That means we got 12 episodes and an ever-dwindling amount of relevancy to capitalize on, so without further ado, let's get right into it.
Oh no, it all went wrong!
Before we get started, let me first establish that season 2025 was an overall banger. Every episode this season was a good episode. Except this one. Yeah, there's no beating around the bush here. Kratos vs. Asura was a massive disappointment. I guess if you lose in 2 champion votes, you gotta pay some kinda toll. I don't want to spend too much time harping on the episode's faults, cause I'd hate to make Devil Artemis leave the show twice, so let's talk about the good first. I enjoyed Kratos' analysis and appreciated how they kept his Greek and Norse adventures separate, highlighting his transition from an angry, rampaging warrior to a calmer, nobler father bearing the responsibility of raising Atreus and honoring his dead second wife's final wishes. Using Symphony No. 9 for Asura's analysis was also a great touch, really fit his character. I like the parallel referencing of the other video game characters they fought in their feats, especially the Robot Chicken PlayStation All-Stars commercial. Love those deep cuts. And the animation when at its peak looks absolutely jaw-dropping. Too bad it's rarely at its peak. Okay, let's just rip the band-aid off. Asura got the shit stick pretty much the whole fight while Kratos got the Gok Gok 3000 with a swirl. Asura had some cool moments for sure, but even his highlight reel falls a little flat when Kratos is no-selling damn near all his attacks. I mean, for God of War's sake, he's mocking this man so hard he's making him speedrun transformations just to one-shot them. But maybe we should cut him a little slack. This is only the natural outcome, right? Let's face it, demonstratable feats and calculable measurements are for virgins. Lore chads just don't care about your nerd shit. Now, let me make this clear. The winner and loser of the fight doesn't influence my ranking of the episode, but failing to convince me of the winner does. It just feels lame as hell for Asura to have all these quantifiable feats put up against a collection of Kratos going, bro, trust. So not only do we have a bad conclusion and a poorly executed fight, but the animation is wildly inconsistent. Sometimes it looks hype, but a lot of the time it looks stiff and choppy. Kratos awkwardly getting up from underneath rubble, shuffling away from Asura's corpse like a robot, and my personal favorite, the "Mother, I have successfully made poopsies in my dipe face." The fight isn't totally bereft of good moments, however. Asura's Destructor transformation was awe-inspiring, I liked the final exchange between the two in a vacuum, and I won't even lie, the delivery on "You made her cry" gives me chills every time. But maybe that's just cause I'm a sucker for the hot-blooded anime character going apeshit when they see their loved ones cry trope. Hey, I see that Kermit vs. Kermit reference, Mr. Artemis, you ain't slick. While the rest of this season's slate rests in the 7 out of 10 range and above, Kratos vs. Asura gets smacked with a disappointing 4 out of 10. What should have been an easy and crowd-pleasing slam dunk mischaracterized one half of one of the show's most requested matchups of all time. And that's not even mentioning the out-of-place alternate ending. Holy damage control, Batman.
It's basically when you're galaxy-brained enough to
Lift the whole 60-plus ton tree off the ground.
Like I said before, even though I consider this the second weakest episode of the season, it's only quality from this point on. While Hulk vs. Godzilla didn't provide as much mass devastation as I would have liked from two characters known for leaving carnal trails of destruction in their wake, they did provide nourishment for the thinky part of my brain. Having Bruce Banner be the win con to overcome Ultima Godzilla and even declaring him the winner of the fight in the end was immensely satisfying on a narrative level. The whole episode's presentation was on point for the most part. Setting up the analyses with quotes from the characters' natures from their respective series' creative leads was a great tone setter, building them up as not just rampaging monsters, but symbols of rage and hatred within ourselves and humanity as a whole. I will say though that after these top tier openings, both analyses felt pretty weak to me. Outside of the banner spotlight, which was necessary for the conclusion later, Hulk's was just a standard cape shit analysis, and Godzilla's was pretty tonally inconsistent. I know that's somewhat unavoidable given the many incarnations and frankly wildly clashing depictions of the Big G, but even still, if you're trying to establish Godzilla as this massive threat to humanity's survival paradoxically brought about by its own scientific hubris, it feels pretty weird to then show him chugging soda and bawling out. I wish I could say the problems don't also extend into the fight, but man, this pacing is kinda ass. Hulk gets hit a couple times, but he's expectedly mauling Zilla with little effort. I get that it makes sense for his atomic breath to power up Hulk into his Worldbreaker form with all that radiation, but it's still crazy to have it happen just 1 minute into the fight. Also, I'm sorry, but I gotta say it, Ultimate Godzilla looks like shit. Explain to me how a Godzilla model from over a decade ago looks better than this walking kaiju excrement. Literally, what are those textures, dude? As for Ultima as a concept, it's definitely doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this matchup, to the point where I do kinda feel like it's on some Metal Sonic and Bowser vs. Eggman levels of carrying for Godzilla in this matchup. Don't get me wrong, the ending of the fight and Bruce's monologue is one for the books, but I did find it rather suspect that they blew through Ultima's defeat in Zilla's analysis rather quickly, to the point where it was pretty obvious Hulk was gonna win. While I wish the fight had a little more smashing before we got all galaxy-brained in the end, I can't deny the episode overall was some good stuff. Even though they had a prime opportunity for Hulk to say puny Godzilla and they just missed it. Like, what are we even doing out here, man?
I'm gonna get crucified!
Alright, I know this is the third time I'm saying this, but I feel like it's most important to remind you all that starting with Hulkzilla, I think all of the rest of the season's episodes are good at a bare minimum. So I want y'all to keep that in mind when I tell you that the most overrated episode of 2025 is Simone vs. Kyle. I'm sorry, fellas, it's good, it's really good, but I just don't get the hype. In contrast with how good and personable Simone's analysis was, Kyle's analysis felt like it was lacking in character and focused more on lantern lore and standard Herald cape shit. The script feels like the two are having a Gurren Lagann quote-off rather than having organic interactions like in, say, Dante vs. Clive or Shigaraki vs. Mahito. And goddammit, it's believe in the me that believes in you, not have faith in the me. How do you get every other quote right except the most famous one? But my biggest disconnect is in the fight itself. Not the animation, mind you. It's crazy impressive that 4 guys came together on the internet and managed to capture even a fraction of the outer-versal scale and mind-blowing powers of these two. The animation is great, but I personally don't care for the art of the fight. Simone and the Gurren Lagann mech look good and detailed enough, but Kyle just doesn't have the same attention to detail for a majority of the fight. He just looks so amateurish and sloppy. It's not until the super drill clash where they give him enough detail to not look like a goofy little doodle man. I also don't care for the Thought Robot's design. It looks too soft and happy to the point where I thought Kyle was just summoning a giant Superman construct the first time I watched this. This episode also commits the deadly sin of a combatant having multiple forms discussed in the analysis, and then the fight skipping over a majority of them. I'm not saying we need a grand transformation sequence every time a Dragon Ball character busts out an obsolete Super Saiyan form, but it's not like you needed to break out the big bold text for the lesser Gurren forms. A flash of light and one cool attack go a long way. And to top off this hot take Sunday with the maraschino cherry of controversy, Spiral of Emotion is similarly the most overrated track of the season. It's not a bad track, but it just doesn't have the explosive high energy you'd think would fit a fight of this scale. Tracks like Hell's Angels and Millennial Monsters bring more hype for comparatively less grand scale battles. With all that being said, however, the episode is still a lot of fun. This episode might be Reference City Central with all the cameos and callbacks. We see the return of the GOAT 99 Bottles, Simone achieving the Employee of the Month speed feat wall in a top tier edit, Fraudfinite getting exposed for the second year in a row, and the various series referenced by Kyle's constructs, from Luigi's Mansion to PGA Tour Tiger Woods. The climax of the fight kicks 7 spectrums of ass, too. You'd think the Super Drill Clash would be the grand finale, but it's when both men are stripped of their grander powers and left to duke it out with their fists that left the biggest impression on me. Even if Simone's pose standing over Kyle's dying body was a little too fabulous for my liking. The conclusion supporting the thesis statement of Gurren Lagann made a lot of sense for determining the victor. So long as Simone existed, he had limitless potential strength. Overall, I think Simone vs. Kyle has too many issues for me to consider it a high tier episode, and considering I haven't yet ranked a particularly infamous road related episode, which means some awkward implications for this list, I have come to terms with the knowledge that I will never be taken seriously by this community again.
Doom. Doom? Doom?
While Kratos vs. Asura was the most disappointing episode of the season overall, Master Chief vs. Doomslayer was the most disappointing episode for me personally. As a big Halo and Doom enjoyer, I was excited for this rematch ever since the Kickstarter poll basically confirmed it, since no other match had a chance in hell of winning. Out of all the combatants in early death battle, Doom Guy is arguably the biggest power creeper among them. Going from Doom Guy to Doom Slayer is literally if the Virgin vs. Chad meme was real, except the Virgin was a Chad and the Chad was on some multi-channel scaling. That's why I loved how in the Slayer's analysis, they start by breaking down his early character's Doom Guy before covering his arsenal, then expanding on both with the added Slayer lore. It acts as a nice in-episode evolution of just how this character and the show has come. Sadly, the same can't be said for Chief's analysis. It's dotted with a number of blemishes, like John's weird matter-of-fact introduction, the lack of love and attention to his weaponry that the original episode did a lot better, and then wasting time bringing up his vehicles that never show up in the fight. At least the "he'll finish it" line was the perfect closer. Then we have the fight, and it's solid, but not quite reaching its full potential. I like how they emphasize Slayer's strength advantage by having him overpower Chief every time they get in a physical struggle, and Chief needing to use the blowback of his grenade launcher to push Slayer away, highlighting his more tactical military mind. I wish we could have had one prolonged hand-to-hand sequence where we could see Chief's superior martial arts against Slayer's sheer brute force. The most we see instead is this brief bit of them falling, where Chief gets in a few strikes before Slayer nearly disables his energy field with just one punch. I'm also sad to say that, aside from the grenade launcher bit, Slayer is clav frame-mogging Chief a majority of the fight. Much like in Hulk vs. Godzilla, I understand why it makes sense in the conclusion, but to make for an entertaining fight, you need to at least give the illusion that they could put up a fight and not just get instantly shit-stomped. Slayer is not only overpowering Chief physically, but he's no-selling rockets, eating point-blank bullets, and clashing the energy sword with his basic-ass Doom Blade. Not even the Crucible, mind you, which was my #1 wet dream for this rematch, but his fucking Gauntlet Blade. Anytime Chief tries to do something cool, he instantly gets embarrassed. He can't use any vehicles except his forklift certification, he gets owned in both helmet POV shots, sucker punched in the back of the head with another head, and despite needing to grapple hook up and away from the Slayer's rocket launcher to another platform, Slayer just appears up by him instantly to catch the rocket and hurl it back at him. It's a great callback to his analysis, but man, how were the two of them more evenly matched in their Season 1 fight animation? I love how Cortana shuts down Vega and calls him an annoying AI, as if Vega had been contributing literally anything to the fight whatsoever. The most disrespectful moment for me was when Chief gets up from the BFG Spartan laser clash, hits the Halo 2 cover art pose, then gets immediately bitched by the Slayer in an awesome kill, but one that can't help but feel like an embarrassing death. Don't get me wrong, I liked the brief team-up demon battle, but what does it say about your fight when the highlight was them fighting not each other? The coolest thing Chief did the whole fight was execute Doot in the goofiest way possible. Halo to Hell was a decent score, if not very memorable outside the episode itself. But hey, getting an actual Doom Eternal DLC composer on the track was pretty sick. Master Chief vs. Doomslayer had the potential to be a top 5 episode of the season with a little more polish and a little less one-sidedness, but it was still nice seeing the salty run back over a decade later. The worst thing I can say about this episode is that it has effectively doomed Samus to a Genshin matchup for the next couple years.
Conchan, don't make me use Thaw Jin to store extra cum in my balls and then use Black Whip to goon on you!
Now you might be thinking to yourself, Neon, how could you possibly justify putting Miles vs. Deku above Simone vs. Kyle? The answer, my friend, is quite complex, but allow me to propose a thesis statement. I just like it more, man. Putting aside the absolute god-tier waiting period and fan reaction, I just think it's a good, solidly made episode. Deku's analysis is one of the best conclusions of the season, expanding the scope of his character to include the impact he made on his friends, who in turn inspired him to not shoulder the burden of fighting all for one alone, successfully tying in MHA's themes of unity and togetherness into the analysis. You Say Danger is such a vibe, honestly, a top 5 track of the season. Love the callbacks to Miles and Deku's previous fight tracks. My favorite aspect of the episode, however, has gotta be the cinematography. Moro is already proving himself to be a god on the animation team, and between this, Bowser vs. Eggman, and Shigaraki vs. Mahito, I have become obsessed with the blending of 2D and 3D that he's been able to pull off through his arcane wizardry. The two of them swinging through New York, clashing powers with particle effects, and all kinds of crazy, dynamic shots gives this fight a wonderful sense of kinetic energy, which is fitting for two characters known for their unique methods of transportation. The Leap of Faith recreation in particular is straight up wallpaper material. But while the animation is superb, the script is not on the same level. In fact, it's kind of embarrassing at times. Not unlike Simone vs. Kyle, both characters are too busy engaging in a quote-off to have more organic interactions. But at least in Simone vs. Kyle, the quotes fit and felt appropriate for the moments in which they're said. The "always do my best" line feels awkwardly shoehorned in after Deku takes them to Old York, and the "I gotta do my own thing" line doesn't even make sense in context. Was fighting him for the past 2 minutes not already doing your own thing? Were you doing someone else's thing prior to the doing of your own thing? But the worst offender has to be the ending. What should be a nice little stylish bookend to the fight, going from a comic opening to a manga closer, is ruined by Deku delivering one of the most cringe closing lines in series history. "You really are the Marvel Comics Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man." A few other issues in the episode include Miles' analysis not feeling like a satisfying evolution of his previous one, Deku's analysis kinda just rushing past his quirkless heroics that got All Might's respect in the first place, and while John Van Doren does a much better Deku than Jose Estrada did in Deku vs. Asta, I don't think Christian Marte did as good a job as Kai Jordan voicing Miles in Miles vs. Static. It's not distractingly off, but it just doesn't capture Miles' mannerisms in my eyes. Or ears. It may be blasphemous to rank this episode over the fan-favorite drill duo, but hey, since when has embarrassing myself in front of this community ever stopped me before?
Nerf this!
We're only entering the 6th episode on this list, and we've already made it to the great portion of the ranking. It truly is all Kino from here. Starting off with the weakest of the greats, we have Wile vs. Tom. The factors that separate these next few entries make their gaps among each other all pretty razor thin, so don't expect me to come down on or praise an episode to high heaven when the difference between them all is honestly more preference than anything else. And my preferential prognosis of Wile vs. Tom is that, while fun, I definitely prefer my fights to be more epic and exciting over goofy and comedic. Not that goofy episodes can't be peak, mind you. Scooby vs. Courage is in contention for having some of the silliest and coolest moments in show history. Wile vs. Tom, meanwhile, well, it's got the silly part down pat. From start to end, this episode is packed with laugh-worthy gags, from the massive text wall of coyote species, to Wile Uchiha, to Boomstick's declaration of God himself nerfing Wile. This is a laugh riot of an episode. And all those bits are just from Wile's analysis. Tom's got some good bits too, and the fight pays proper homage to their slapstick history, while also highlighting Tom's craftiness and adaptability, and Coyote's shit luck screwing him over and over. The fight isn't exactly bereft of cool moments, but nothing here comes close to scraping a pube on the glorious sack of the Scooby vs. Courage climax. The pacing takes a turn for the worse when they have all but one of Tom's 9 lives float away halfway in the fight. I'm not saying we needed to see him suffer fatal injuries 7 more times, but it still can't help but feel a little ridiculous that a nuke can go off in his face and not take 1 life, but a falling plane takes out 8 at once. Also, this doesn't detract from the episode's ranking, but I just need to ask, what was with the Starship Troopers bit? Of all the classic Tom gags you could have chosen for him to reference, you made him say an uncharacteristic quote from a completely unrelated property that doesn't even make sense in the context of the scene. Like, actually, what were they thinking? Shout out the YouTube sidebar gag, all my homies hate solo leveling. And is that the fucking calamity box? Local Manta can't stop taking L's. I think Wile vs. Tom has a couple miscues and could have leaned a little more on fighting that stretched beyond just smashing a coyote sign over their heads 100 times. As far as the 3 currently existing fan-voted episodes go, I'd say this is a solid silver medal. Bill vs. Discord clears with ease, and while I wish the opposite were true, this episode is lapping Cole vs. Alex. Hopefully Geets vs. Nero stuns us all with the dark horse banger of all bangers. Hang on, what does that text box say? Wile can hypnotize Tom into killing himself?
Tom,
Kill yourself.
I was born in 1601.
I'm a vampire.
Blade vs. Buffy is one of those times where you stop and remember that, ironically, the most limiting medium of fight presentation is also the most expensive. Sure, animation may be a time-intensive, detail-focused medium, but at least as long as you can draw, or rig models well, or whatever, you have basically no limits on what you could make. Meanwhile, the Ismahawk crew are limited by who they can cast, where they can shoot, what they can shoot, and also paying an entire crew that dwarves a multi-animator episode like Simone vs. Kyle like 3 times over at least. I know it's not one-for-one credit allocation, but simply comparing the size of these episode credits speaks for itself. I can only imagine what the final cost of this episode to produce was. With all that being said, this is easily the best live-action death battle yet. Granted, the bar for competition in this 3-horse race is basically 2 stallions and 1 braying donkey, but let's not take anything away from the cinema of Blade vs. Buffy. And when I say cinema, I'm not just talking about the fighting, I'm talking about the everything else. This is the second longest fight in show history, just behind the OG Goku vs. Superman. To be fair, it's as long as it is because there's arguably 4 minutes worth of build-up before the 2 combatants start fighting each other, but then again, oh my sweet beloved build-up, how I've missed you so! It's not that we don't get build-up at all anymore, but being reminded of the days when Snake was sneaking into a compound Sam had already infiltrated and establishing a reason for them both being there and encountering each other that makes perfect sense for both of them is almost a lost art in death battle today, especially since the advent of starting fights mid-battle. Hell, the setup and ensuing vampire fight is longer than some other episode's entire fight animations. The club setting is pitch perfect in more ways than one. Not only does it work as an homage to the original Blade movie, but it also sets the vibe of the fight immaculately. With DJ Singer on the beat, Neon Ash is a tasty techno track that scores the Vampire Club Massacre to a T. The whole fight feels like a genuine fan film, even down to the impressive for YouTube, would be shunned out of the theater level visual effects. I'm not trying to be mean, by the way. They all look great when you're not a meticulous detail observer like me who goes through these fights frame by frame looking at everything he can. All the choreography in this fight is slick as fuck. Blade delivering a suplex to Smosh Game's Mari, Buffy wrapping her leather jacket around Blade's arm to disarm and steal his sword, and the best goddamn bathroom fight since Snake vs. Sam. Seriously, look at this bathroom, man. What the fuck is this Godzilla archetype looking ass bathroom? Where do you even find a place with a bathroom like this? And to top it all off, we even got a little toilet fighting. Toilet fighting! Now with all my glaze out of the way, it's not quite a flawless episode. Both analyses were pretty solid overall, but the last second hasty introduction of the Slayer Scythe and Buffy's analysis pulled some shenanigan alarms in my head, which would prove true in the conclusion. Speaking of the Scythe, while the choreography throughout the whole fight was incredible, there's really not much back and forth between the two until Buffy starts using the Scythe. Blade is just kinda kicking her ass a majority of the time until she busts out her win con and then proceeds to one-shot both his strongest weapons. And lastly... Okay, look, this is my pettiest critique of all time, and I mean no disrespect to Fiction Seagal's choreography and stunt work, but man, his voice is just too high-pitched and soft-sounding to fit Blade's character. Again, and I can't stress this enough, this is a fairly petty and admittedly kind of unfair critique to levy against the episode. I understand that casting is limited when the role you're trying to fill is that of a strong, fit black male that can pull off the look of Blade while also knowing a good amount of fight choreography, but I can't help it, man. After years of hearing different Blades from Wesley Snipes to Terry Crews to Gabe Kunda, I'm just so used to him having a deeper, rougher sounding voice that hearing Seagal's higher cadence and comparatively smoother voice threw me off my first viewing and every subsequent viewing after. It's not a demerit on the episode, the fight pacing and conclusion are more damning issues, but they cast Buffy pretty spot on with Mara Mulroney, so I gotta call everything down the middle, even the casting. I'm so sorry, Mr. Seagal. Please don't come to my house and kick my ass like I know you so easily could.
That's right, now we're gonna battle in hell!
Throughout this ranking, the more astute of you viewers might have picked up on my particular valuing of script and screenplay in these episodes. As someone who both loves and studies the art of storytelling, I find myself drawn to media that contains what I consider the most well thought out or cleverly written stories. So with all that said, you don't need me to tell you that Ghost Rider vs. Spawn is in contention for one of the best scripts in all of Death Battle. If the I'll be damned exchange cured my erectile dysfunction, the God forbid line made me drop a third testicle. This is how you write a fucking fight. You can have the characters repeat their iconic lines to add some authenticity, but organic interactions trump lazy quote-offs every time. Simone vs. Kyle has cuck dreams about Ryder vs. Spawn's dialogue. The auditory pleasuring doesn't stop at the script either. Hell's Angels is both a top 3 track of the season and one of the most hardcore tracks of the show's entire run, perfectly matching the satanic heavy metal energy of the combatants. I guess that's what happens when you feature someone off the motherfucking Metal Gear Rising Revengeance soundtrack. The actual fight animation isn't a particular standout, especially with the lack of creative choreography and exchanging of powers, but man, with writing and music this good, you can drink a little from the well of hype moments and aura. It's just a shame they had to take out the Tales from the Hood line to appease the YouTube community guidelines. All hail their benevolent and almighty wisdom. Please don't age restrict this video after I start making money on this channel. While the backgrounds of heaven and hell are pretty simple and basic looking, they make up for this by having the two realms constantly changing depending on who's winning, which is an awesome effect. Plus, the unique and metal kill and spawn Uno reversing the pennant stare into the pennant squared was such a high note to end on. Then we have the analyses and conclusion, which are the weak links for me. Ghost Riders is pretty standard Marvel cape shit affair, with the refreshing twist of covering Johnny's fall from grace and becoming a devil just as bad as Mephisto after he usurps his throne. Spawn's analysis is much stronger, going over his life as a hired gun and how he was the best at taking orders, and despite wanting to be a human again, he knew deep down he deserved to be a Hellspawn forever after all the horrible orders he followed to the letter. As for the conclusion, I don't know, man. I can't help but to come away feeling a little blah when a character wins off their hacks. No one's favorite win con is hacks. But I suppose that's not entirely the episode's fault, so it can rest comfortably as the gatekeeper of the top 5. It was also very appropriate that Sans showed up twice in the episode themed about hell.
Bad touch, stranger danger.
Moving from one episode with great writing to the next, Shigaraki vs. Mahito. Right out the gate, Shigaraki might just have the best analysis of the season. Hilariously, unlike his canon story arc, he was given incredible justice, covering his tragic upbringing, his being groomed by All For One into the hateful man-baby he would become, his dark parallel to Deku's story, to the expertly executed reveal that All For One had been the man behind the slaughter of his entire family, just to fuck with All Might. Capping off the analysis with his bittersweet ending of Deku trying to save him even after his wicked actions and decayed soul, but instead asking he be remembered as the monstrous villain that terrorized Japan and not the scared and abused little boy he was. Mwah. All-timer analysis right here, one for the books. Mahito's doesn't come nearly as close to the insane highs Shigaraki's does, but it's still fun to learn about his creepy powers and his twisted views on life and mankind. I'm glad they also highlighted his eventual breaking of Yuji's spirit, even in his own defeat at his hands. Then we get to the fight, and wow, would you look at that, Moro is now 3-3 in fights he's animated. Seriously, what a fantastic addition to the animation team. I gotta check out Indie Cross soon, man. The gore in this fight was beautifully grotesque, as Mahito's idol transfiguration made goopy messes of both himself and Shigaraki. Their banter was also top tier, as Mahito took irreverent pleasure in Shigaraki's cringe nerd speak and in bullying his abusive upbringing. The domain expansion into All For One counter is one of the best sequences of the entire season, and one that I somehow didn't even think about until it happened and I went, oh wow, that actually makes perfect sense for that to happen. Shigaraki's retort to Mahito's dismissal of his trauma with what basically amounts to a no you is pitch perfect to his character. While I can't sing the animation and writing's praises enough, I can't say the same for the track. Skin Deep is part of this slowly increasing and kind of annoying sentiment that just because one or both of the combatants are from an anime, their fight track has to be in Japanese. And with all due respect to the GOAT Brandon Yates, his Japanese is just not very good. Forgive me for being blunt, but the way he pronounces syllables sounds much too amateurish and loose to the point where whenever I can hear the lyrics of the song in the fight, I get distracted by it. I know this might come off as pretentious, an American critiquing another person's way of speaking Japanese when they can speak it way better than I can, but go listen to Death in Bloom and compare Maria Schultz's Japanese vocals to Brandon's, and the difference is night and day. Hey fellas, future Neon here. After I wrote this entire script, Ichigo vs. Yusuke came out, and once again the track is all Japanese and sung by Brandon Yates. However, unlike Skin Deep, Soul Outsider kicks 27 kinds of ass, and Brandon sings it very well, so much better than he did in Skin Deep. So I guess he either got better at singing Japanese in the last year, or maybe the grungy vocal style he was aiming for in Skin Deep was something he just couldn't pull off. My apologies, Mr. Yates, I was unfamiliar with your game. Skin Deep still sounds pretty bad though. Also, this isn't a knock against the episode, but I'm more so just shocked that no one caught this plot hole error in the fight. When Mahito makes a clone body of himself, that clone can't use idol transfiguration on other people, so this sequence where the clones are JJK jumping Shigaraki and they're both able to erase his quirks with their attacks shouldn't be happening. Again, it's not a knock, I just researched the Death Battle wiki pages of every episode that I'm covering, and to notice that happen in the fight but not see it listed under the errors section is wild to me. If it gets added after this video comes out, you'll know why. Anyways, Shigaraki vs. Mahito is great, the conclusion was well structured and well argued, and most importantly, I want to give Akane back shot.
Come on, Wiz. Call it what it really is. It's 3.
We finally made it, the cream of the crop. And to the bronze goes episode 200, rwby vs. Maka, aka the ethical stomp. Okay, let's get my bitching out of the way first. Call me a heretic, but I don't care who knows it, I gotta speak my truth. I've never cared for Lindsay Jones as a voice actor. She's been playing the same character for over a decade, and she's been playing that character poorly. At her best, rwby's voice is okay, and at her worst, Jones is incapable of inflecting any emotions to her voice outside of sounding bubbly. It's the shiny, rare moment where I wish they got anyone but the official voice actor to play the character. Well, now that I've burned bridges with the entire rwby fandom, let's talk about the positives. Let's start with the holy shit, you guys, fucking look at this fight choreography. Had it not been for Blade vs. Buffy, this episode would have had best choreography of the season locked down easily. And this is no small feat either. They took weapons as big and awkward as scythes and made them look graceful and fast while not completely removing the sense of weight that they should carry. They break this rule one time for a scythe rush clash, but I think we can very easily give this instance a rule of cool pass. Literally everything about this fight animation is perfect. I can only glaze it so much without just repeating all the praises everyone else has already heaped upon it. Everything from the excellent sound design, the gorgeous background, hell, they even go the extra distance and timed moments of the fight to sync with the song in some instances. Speaking of the song, Death in Bloom is a phenomenal track and would have taken the crown of best track of the season if it weren't for the one last second entrant, which we'll talk about later. The regular version is already great, but the Adagio version with the Paper Moon piano verse, orgasmic. It's not only great to listen to just on its own, but when Soul accurately plays the piano to activate Soul Adagio, that entire sequence gives me chills in the best possible way. And the final strike with the rwby character's first non-shit death in the series, ending with that magnificent shot of rwby's scythe planted against the moons from both series, I don't think they could have constructed any better tribute to Monty than that. I've been giving the fight the Sucky Suck 3000 with a twist this whole time, mainly because when we get to the analyses, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. Even if you knew nothing about these characters going in, them putting Maka at faster than light speeds and mountain level strength, while offering no clear stats for rwby, makes it woefully obvious Maka is mopping the floor with her, to the point where they literally had to make up a category to give rwby a single advantage, and even that's debatable, given Soul's movements could simply make up for Maka's lack of skill on her own. Normally, obvious stomps are a bit of a drawback to me in non-joke fights, but considering the goal of this episode was to both pay tribute to and technically honor the request of a dead man, I'd be an asshole for marking that against the rating. Shout out Maka's analysis for having some of the best edits in show history though. Wow, it's so pretty. rwby's analysis was good too, but I didn't care for their trivializing of rwby's struggles throughout her story with an she got over it. The rwby punch getting blocked with the Smash Ultimate parry sound followed by Roblox oof was a good bit at least. In the end, rwby vs. Maka is both a badass, wildly exciting episode and a touching tribute to one of the internet's greatest animators of all time. Monty's life may have been taken from us too soon, but his influence will live forever.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
One of the greatest losses in all of Death Battle was the departure of Torian Crawford, the visionary 3D animator behind many of what could be considered the best episodes in the show's history. Snake vs. Sam, Iron Man vs. Luthor, Pokemon vs. Digimon, and the list goes on. He would leave the show briefly in 2018 to be the lead animator on the Rooster Teeth animated series Genlock before returning to Death Battle after one season, where he would then leave Rooster Teeth altogether to join video game developer Respawn as an animator. As such, Torian had been away from Death Battle for 4.5 years now. One of the Save Death Battle Kickstarter stretch goals was an episode featuring Torian as the lead 3D animator, leading to much excitement among the community for our glorious King's return to the show. And I gotta say, it did not disappoint. Dante vs. Clive is a visual spectacle befitting the flashy origins of these two characters. Dante's analysis is pretty good, a nice change of focus from his first appearance on the show, now focusing on his character and his relationship with his brother Virgil, while expanding on his new powers and abilities from DMC5. The real star of the show, however, is Clive, who provides us with yet another contender for best analysis of the season. Granted, they had the benefit of only having to explore only one video game's worth of story and lore, but considering that game is a 50-hour JRPG, I felt like they summed up the main points and story beats pretty effectively, telling the story of Clive's relationship with his brother Joshua and the betrayal of their mother. It's still crazy to me how this is year 15 of Death Battle and it took them this long to get the first Final Fantasy rep outside of FF7, and even then it had to do with both recency bias and the combat director being the guy behind the combat of Devil May Cry games. Oh well, better late than never, I suppose. Then we get to the fight, and let's get my 2 criticisms out of the way. The mouth movements on the characters are pretty egregiously awful, at least at the start of the fight. Once Dante enters Devil Trigger, they look much more fluent and natural, but before then, both of them just look like they're flapping their lips like anime characters. Works for 2D drawings, doesn't quite work with 3D models. That's more of a nitpick, I suppose, but then we get to the track. The devil inside is an interesting case to me. On one hand, Brandon's rapping is weirdly timed and kinda cringy when listened to by itself, but in the battle, it's placed in the background just enough to lend perfectly to the Devil May Cry vibe of the fight. The chorus, metal throat singing, and the instrumentals all kick ass though. I guess it just comes down to taste, and if this is your jam, more power to you. What is my jam is all the flipping, the game references, the interactions, and the escalation of the fight. Dante's Devil May Care fighting style clashes nicely with Clive's comparatively straightforward approach to combat. In keeping with the DMC vibes, the fight is both epic and fun. Little gags that inject levity into the action without being distracting, like the bard line, Dante getting command grabbed out of the Michael Jackson pose, and Clive's astonishment at discovering what the hell a motorcycle is. Recreating the rain fight from DMC3's opening cutscene was awesome, as well as the monster fight in space. On my first viewing, it was a little hard to distinguish the two with their similar colors and fire effects, but on rewatch, I'm better able to tell them apart with their silhouettes and specific body details. No amount of rewatching still lets me understand what quite happened in that final clash that sends them both down to earth, but hey, big monster make thing go boom. I also appreciated how they both entered their final forms pretty much at the same time to keep the outcome as unpredictable as possible. All capped off with one last sword clash that ends with a cool death for Dante. The conclusion makes great sense of the result too. With both characters having very similar stats and advantages, it ultimately came down to who had more to give, with Dante canonically unable to maintain his super forms longer than Clive being the deciding factor. Dante vs. Clive lived up to the hype of Torian's grand return to the show, and while I wouldn't put it quite up there with all-timers like Snake vs. Sam and Iron Man vs. Luthor, it's still an amazing addition to his resume, and served as the penultimate episode to both the season and this ranking. The problem with preparing ranking videos like these while work is still being done on the media you're ranking is that if something new comes out in the pre-production phase that causes you to have to rewrite a huge chunk of your list, you kinda just have to hold that. And I gotta be honest, while I was excited for Ash vs. Yugi, I really didn't think it would live up to the hype, let alone top the list. But lo and behold, here I stand, falling for it again. Ash vs. Yugi is a crowd-pleasing, adrenaline-inducing, perpetual hype machine that never fails to get the little kid in me that watched both anime on 4Kids growing up as giddy as a horse. You know an episode ain't fucking around when the introductory character portraits are getting animated. This episode has 3 different sponsors in it, and you can tell they didn't waste a cent of that budget. Editing in Death Battle has been consistently great ever since DJ Tiki became the lead editor, but holy shit, this episode is next level. Giving every one of Ash's name-drop Pokemon their own Pokédex number entry and Yugi's cards their own sports-like spotlight is just flexing on us mere mortals at this point. Also, name-dropping the Vikings and the Giants? DJ, you are a football fan and I can prove it. Ash's analysis was awesome, followed his journey all the way, and was very cathartic for him to win in the end, yet still continue his journey. Yugi's analysis was similarly great, if for no other reason than as a former Yugioh fan, I was excited to see it covered for the first time on the show. I appreciate that they didn't skimp out on covering Season 0 and the OG manga before the focus was placed on duel monsters. The 2000 card deck edit was hilarious too. Then comes the fight, and man, I haven't felt so giddy on the inside watching a fight like this since Bowser vs. Eggman. Sorry to spoil the eventual 2024 ranking video. The Game Boy title screen recreation was neat, but seeing Pikachu duke it out with Dark Magician while the legends Sceptile, Lucario, Crocodile, Celtic Guardian, Buster Blader, and Giant Soldier Stone stood alongside them had the inner child in me from 20 years ago bouncing off the walls. Elsie Lovelock and Tom Shulk pull off an amazing Ash and Yami/Yugi respectively, 2 of the best voice performances of the season. Especially Shulk, who was able to pull off both Yami's deeper, bolder voice and Yugi's softer, more timid voice. After Crocodile fainted and Ash brought out his entire squad, I popped the fuck off when he turned around the hat and brought out Charizard, who not only blew past Soldier of Stone to do damage to Yugi's life points, but pushed him to summon his entire deck as well. And the music, man, the music! Millennial Monsters is not only the best track of the season, it might just be the best track of all time, period. Not only is Brandon giving it his all per usual, but they got the legend Jason fucking Page on the track? Godlike. When Charizard is brought out to Page screaming "It all draws down to the heart," it never fails to send a shiver down my spine. Being the third army fight in show history, the action is chaotic in all the best ways. Gandora firing lasers all over the stadium, Incineroar bodying Celtic Guardian with an Azuna drop, and Lucario rushing through the battlefield, going Mega, and destroying Gandora and Blackluster Soldier, it all lends itself to the feeling of all-out war between these two. There's so many attentions to detail as well. From little cameos like Oshawott simping over Silent Magician to the working of each world's mechanics into the fight, like Karibo sacrificing himself in front of a triple finish and negating the entire attack due to his ability, Summon Skull being super effective against Charizard because it used an electric attack on a flying type, or Yugi sealing Gengar away in the Millennium Puzzle because it's a ghost. It's not just the little things though, as this episode's pull-up game was unbelievable. Charizard, Slifer, Gengar, the Dark Magicians, and Herakti all rolled up tough as hell, but it's Sol Galeo that steals the spotlight with this actual video game cutscene quality pull-up. I mean, come on. Ash Greninja destroying the Millennium Puzzle is crazy work, but it leads into Yugi standing up and not flinching at the army of monsters staring him down, setting up his game-winning combo with Herakti and the Magicians. Ash and Pikachu go for one last Hail Mary with a 10 million volt Thunderbolt as their outfits change to match their appearances throughout the anime's run, and the music reaches its peak with those shredding guitars and Yates and Page singing like rent was due, only to be met with the infamous Magic Cylinder ending the fight. Ash and his Pokemon all turning to stone was a lovely nod to the first movie, along with Yugi giving Ash the same thumbs up pose that Atem gave him when returning to the afterlife, all with the Pokemon anime-styled B-end box. Holy fuck, I adore this episode. Is it an obvious stomp as soon as you hear that Herakti created the multiverse and spent a single brain cell thinking about how Ash has 0 counters to spell and trap cards? Sure. Is my GOAT Beaver Warrior's absence a crime the likes of which should earn the crew 30 days in the gulag? Definitely. Does that make the fight any less of an absolute tour de force of animation and fan service between the two series? Not even close. Ash vs. Yugi fired on all cylinders to provide a glorious send-off to the show's 2025 season, and is, for my money, easily the best episode of the 2025 season of Death Battle. And with that, it's finally done! My first fully self-produced video is complete, and with both it and the 2025 season of Death Battle in the books, we can look forward to next season, where hopefully I'll have this video up before the 2026 season premiere. In any case, I'm definitely keen on making more Death Battle content if that's what you guys would like to see. I'll definitely make a video ranking all of the 2026 episodes next year, as well as making past season ranking videos over time. I also have a couple projects in the works that aren't Death Battle related, as I don't want to put myself in a box too early and be known as a one-trick pony. I like media of all kinds, which is part of the reason why I love Death Battle, for covering all kinds of fictitious media and bringing them together in the name of both celebrating their work and entertaining us with awesome what-if scenarios. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, then please give it a like and leave a comment letting me know what you thought about it. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. I already have a 2024 season ranking video in the works, because it'll literally only be a third of the work put into this video, without the need to scramble to get it done before I miss the peak window. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I'm NeonManta, and you'll see me next time.